Good morning, and thank you for joining me for the review of the day, which is Decision at Doona by Anne McCaffrey. I've got this rather beautiful little corgi edition, which is in pretty good nick. It was, of course, in always even better nick before I started carrying it around my bag reading it. There's this thing that Ira does where he says you can pause and zoom in on the back if you want to read that. And with this book, I think that's valid because it doesn't seem to have the huge online presence of some of the books that I read. Okay, this isn't it. I really do love that cover art. Did I even check to see who did it? I didn't. I'll write it below if I can find it. Okay, so Decision at Doona is very much a classic science fiction. It is a well-known, I would say, classic science fiction book. And of course, the author, Anne McCaffrey, is iconic. She died in 2011, but she did some amazing things and was a huge shining light in the genre. I have many books of hers that I love dearly, have had for years, have reread a lot. Decision at Doona I owned when I was a teenager, and I read it. I would say I probably read it more than once, but that is several decades ago. I'm terrified at how long ago that is. I don't remember it well. Now, I remember the overarching story, so there was no actual surprises there for me, but the actual individual experience of reading it page by page, sentence by sentence, that felt new, not particularly familiar. Not like I was reminding myself of something I'd read before, but rather as if I was reading something new. I don't think you can spoiler this book, really. It's been out for too long. It is too iconic, too well known universally as a first contact story between humans and an alien race on another planet. That'd be Doona. Small interesting factoid. Doona in Australia is slang for what I think you call duvet in England, or maybe a quilt in America, a thick blanket stuffed with feathers or synthetic stuffing. So that's always a little bit of a funny. It's like, oh yeah, at Doona, hey? This was first published, or copyright at least, in 1969. I don't think it's spoiler material, so I'm just going to talk about it. Yes, so iconic first contact story. And one of the things that Anne McCaffrey does here that I like, that are interesting, is she starts with the alien race. We start with the Harubans on their planet in a council chamber discussing the opening of a specific planet. That planet in question. Now we learn that there are 7 speakers that constitute the government of Doona. First speaker is in favour of opening up this planet, which they themselves do not call Doona. I can't remember what they call it in that first chapter. There is third speaker is obviously being set up as the prime antagonist in the plot from the Haruban side. He doesn't want this planet opened. Now, Doona is described as a beautiful pastoral planet, a green jewel with agricultural potential, and the third speaker wants to open up a metal-rich iron and mining planet instead of that one. The way in which he pushes this decision is what points at him as being an antagonist, not that he wants to do it. And in his wanting to open up that planet first, we learn that the Haruban homeworld is incredibly overpopulated, and there are a lot of signs of an unhealthy population, such as huge suicide rate, especially among the young people, a lack of motivation to train, to explore, to have a better life. And they do that by saying, we can't really open the mining planet, we don't have enough skilled people to do it. Very soon we won't have enough teachers to teach the skills that they need, and no one is interested in learning. Bird interested in squeaking. Yush. But eventually, first speaker and a couple of the others managed to manipulate third speaker to the point where the decision is made. They're going to send colonists to the pastoral, beautiful planet that we know is going to be Doona. We then skip sideways to the human planet and our main protagonist there, Ken Reeve. He has just received notification that he and his family have been approved for colonists for Doona. And he's really excited. He's going home to tell his wife. And in the course of this journey back to his home, we learn that the Haruban home planet and the human home planet Earth are actually quite similar in that both are overbuilt, they're incredibly massed, you've got high suicide rates, low levels of training. And as Ken travels back to his home, we learn that walking too fast, talking too loudly, gesturing too wildly, all of these things are things for which he can be reported. Now, money, we gather, still is a thing, but the more important thing is calories. As T.J. Bass did in his overpopulated world in the 60s, this must have been a thing. If you are too heavily regulated for walking too fast on a belt, on a transport belt, then probably what's going to happen is they're going to restrict your calories. When we get back to his place, we learn that he has been waiting, hopefully, to get off the planet for a long time. We learn that he has 2 children, Ilsa and Todd. And Todd, the youngest boy, is 6 when most of this book takes place, and he's very, very loud. So there have been countless reports and admonitions, and his family keeps getting into trouble. Todd is a primary mover in this book, and Decision at Doona is famously dedicated by Anne McCaffrey to Todd, of course. And there is a story going around the internet, and I don't know how true it is, that Todd once got told in a school play to be quiet because he was talking too loudly, and that was a motivator for this. I feel like there was probably more to it than one play and one admonition, but you know. Okay, we skip across to Doona. The colonists, all 11 men, have just completed their first winter on Doona. They have survived. They're eagerly awaiting the transport which will bring their wives and children and a whole heap of livestock. We won't even go there to Doona. And Ken Reeves is walking through the forest when he is unexpectedly confronted by 2 juvenile Harubans who are playing ball. He behaves very sensibly. He catches the ball and throws it back to them, and is introduced to the fact that there's a whole bipedal sentient species just over the ridge from where the Earthmen have established their village. Now we, of course, know or are pretty sure that these Harubans are intelligent, post-industrialized, and are settling the planet. But the humans on Doona don't, and this gives them a huge confrontational issue. When they were chosen for settlers, they knew there was going to be minimal contact. The first 11 families were going to establish themselves for quite a while before another group came in. The planet had been extensively surveyed, showing no intelligent species and a whole heap of other things they got wrong as well. But there are 3 space departments who I haven't bothered to remember, I'm afraid, who are involved in exploration of space, defense of space, and something else. None of these expected there to be an intelligent race, and humanity have once before contacted an intelligent alien species who ended up committing suicide, mass suicide of their species as a result of contact with humans. So there's laws about contacting intelligent people of other races. Our colonists are very moral, and they are thrown into a spin about this, and they say no, however much we love it, and they all do love it there, we're going to have to leave because intelligent species, Siwanese decision, whatever. The Harubans, however, have no compunction about interacting with humanity. They come and visit. They're fascinated by the horses, and especially the horses, but also the cows and other animals when they arrive. They decide to build a bridge, and a bridge is completed linking the two settlements. Mostly from the Haruban side, the humans are a bit reluctant, but they kind of insist. And they start learning each other's languages. Humans intentionally learning Haruban, which has a lot of r's in it by the sound of it. And Harubans are learning English, but more subtly. Now, have I mentioned that the Harubans are cats? Yes, Anne McCaffrey was notoriously fond of cats. She based most of her dragon characteristics in Pern on cats rather than on horses. The Harubans are bipedal, upright, very tall, we gather, cats. They apparently smile like we do, but their language is complex and phonetic. I imagine it a bit like Thai, where you can't actually completely hear the things you're trying to reproduce. And when the families arrive, Ken finds that his youngest son, Todd, has been the bane of everyone's existence, making a mess, annoying people, being difficult. He's a 6-year-old. And when they finally land, they pretty much shove him at him and goes, he needs some fatherly attention, get him off our hands. Todd doesn't particularly like his father, who he doesn't remember very well, which is, it's a thing. But he falls in instant love with one of the pre-adolescent Haruban children and wants to spend all of his time over the ridge. The Harubans actually get along with him better than the humans do, indicating that their child psychology is better, as well as many of the other sciences. So here we have the humans in one village, the Harubans in the other. Todd desperately wanting to spend all of his time with Harubans. He ties a piece of rope around his waist and makes it look like a tail. He desperately wants a tail like the Harubans have. And that is where we stand for the majority of this book. And as classic science fiction goes, it's not a short book. It's over 200 pages. It is, in this edition, 221 pages. And here we run into what is a problem for me with the majority of this book is things that introduction, the entry that I've described so far is really good. And the ending is really interesting. But the majority of those 200 odd pages are the center. And they stand where I just described. You've got two villages. The Harubans clearly know the humans aren't from there. The humans don't guess that the Harubans aren't. The fact that they've got technology that seems in advance of theirs doesn't clue them in. The fact that they've got an incredibly complex phonetic language does clue them in, but they still ignore that clue. Upon first contact, one of their scientists actually says, that's odd, there's no other feline mammals on this planet that they could have evolved from. That's a pretty huge clue. No one paid any attention. So we've got well over 100 pages, the majority of this book, with the humans running around in small circles going, oh no, we have to leave. We can't impact on this pre-industrial culture. It's like, it's not pre-industrial culture. It's got better medicine than yours. It's got better engineering than yours. It's got a better language than yours. How do you have as much contact with them as you've got and not make 2 and 2 equal 4? So, and I found that very frustrating. The other element of frustration was Todd. So Anne McCaffrey clearly loved Todd as a character in this book, probably because she was using this book to excise some of her frustrations in having an active, intelligent 6-year-old. I did not love Todd in this book, and he's central to almost everything that happens. He's sulky, he's miserable, he's unaffectionate with humans, only with cats. He's causing endless troubles, and I can forgive a 6-year-old all of those things, but the way the humans deal with it is poor, and they're meant to have a child psychologist on their team, and how she deals with it is poor. So Todd is a thorn in the flesh rather than a pleasant part of this book, and he's pretty central to pretty much everything that happens. I especially didn't like the fact that as Anne McCaffrey wrote Ken Reeve, Todd's father, you had to kind of dislike the man because he's so inept at what he's doing. And that, as I said, felt like most of the book. Then we get to the end. The colonists finally have it made so clear to them that the Herubans aren't from the planet that they finally have to accept it. The reader by now is probably smacking themselves in the face. It's like, finally. And then we reach the point where all these different spice departments are descending on Doona, threatening the colonists with one thing or another. Now, the first time that one of them arrives, the Herubans pack up and leave. There's your first clue. It's like a full village full of adults and children and houses and all the stuff, and it just vanishes like that. So there's only pine needles, or an alien similarity to pine needles, left on the ground. And you think that that is a pre-industrial society. Bah. Anyway, eventually it transpires they've got matter transmitters and they've got strong orders not to contact until other species. Got it. Once this obvious fact is finally hammered and chiseled into the heads of the incredibly dense human colonists, we end up with the final part of this book, which is the decision at Doona, where space departments, one involved in diplomacy, and first speakers from the Heruban planet arrive, and they all sit down and discuss the pros and cons, and it ends happily with the colonists able to stay in Doona, the Herubans able to continue to have colonists on Doona, and for a 25-year plan. Third speaker, of course, opposes anything sensible, but is overcome, and is partly overcome by Todd, who is a primary translator, as someone who has learnt not only Heruban fast, but he's learnt the formal Heruban with which their speakers need to be addressed, as well as the day-to-day Heruban. So did I like this book? Honestly, not much. And teenage Deb didn't much like it either, and that's why during one move or another I gave this one away, whereas I've carried my Crystal Singers and my Pern books loyally around the world and around Australia, with them getting more and more tattered at each port of call. This one, when I owned it as a teenager, I didn't much care for it. So when I came to read it a couple of days ago, I looked at it and I wondered if grown-up Deb would have more insight into this than teenage Deb did. And the answer is no. I feel that this book has some excellent concepts. I love the fascinating notion of our first contact being with basically a intelligent cat species. I like that. I like the Herubans much more than the humans, which I suspect Anne McCaffrey did as well, because it came through. Unfortunately, most of this isn't from the Heruban point of view. It's mostly from the human point of view. And so it's less than enjoyable to read. I often got frustrated with it. A few times I put it down and went off to do other things, which is good for the general cleanliness of my house, perhaps, but that's not what I want from a book, and it's not what I expect from a really good book. I think overall, this book is a really good book, simply because it has concepts about first contact that I think were new when this was written. It did things that hadn't been done before. But in terms of enjoyability, I think I have to continue to rate Decision at Doona 2 out of 5 stars. The ending, I will mention a couple of other things about it. The ending is long, and it is a sensible, logical, mature sort of ending that you would expect with two species nutting out a contract and an initial treaty. But that makes it a little bit tedious. It's a bit hard to elevate negotiations around a negotiating table to something that's entertaining. At times, Anne McCaffrey does do it, but it's not the sort of emotional or attaching conclusion to a story that it could be. It's a very mature one. An adult will probably appreciate this rather than a blaster battle, but it doesn't do well. So this book actually feels like 3 bits. It feels like the first bit where we're talking about the 2 species wanting to settle and the planet on which they settle. The initial settling isn't bad. Then we've got that huge central bit where Ken spends his whole time running after Todd, and the whole human settlement spends the whole time going, oh no, so we've contacted an alien species, they're going to commit suicide because we're so much more evolved than them, when it's completely clear to the reader that they're not. I don't know what she thought she was doing there. And then we've got the end story where you've got mature negotiations, which really needed a bit more to be fully enticing. I do really like the way Anne McCaffrey uses human social indices to position the 2 different cultures on a very analogous level. There's a few small differences which I'm not going to bother to mention, because I would hope that some other people would want to read this iconic First Contact by a legend in SFF, that's Anne McCaffrey. And if you read them, at least you'll have some surprises waiting for you. One other thing about it, I like the fact that part of the way in which the Harubans are described as more mature than us as a species is that their planet is actually further along the environmental degradation scale than ours. Just a little bit. So there's a small element of see where we're going. We haven't got there yet, but we can. Now, those are my criticisms of Decision at Doona. I have seen other criticisms. I have seen a couple of people stop reading this because they felt it was violently misogynistic. I, as ever, differ. This was written in the 60s. Yes, it was written by a woman, but I don't see any reason why a female author shouldn't have male characters as their primary characters. It doesn't have many women in it, to be honest. So there's a valid criticism there. Doona is initially settled by 11 men. Their wives and children appear later. And when their wives appear, it's apparently for the purpose of cooking them meals. That cooking, learning how to cook on a regular stove seems to be the main pioneering spirit of the woman on Doona. And yeah, it's a bit on the nose. Ken has got 2 kids. He's got Todd, who we hear about incessantly. He's got an older daughter who is the good child who we never hear about, except standing there wringing her hands over what Todd has done now. It's also a bit on the nose. But not every book has to have a female character in it for me, and I don't think it's especially misogynistic, especially not compared to the next book which I started, because I finished this a couple of days ago now. I'm reading Robert Heinlein. Going from Anne McCaffrey to Robert Heinlein really makes you appreciate a lot about her. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you've read it, tell me what you think. Do any of my criticisms make any sense to you? Have you got other criticisms? I'd love to hear them and discuss them. In the meantime, read good books and have a great day.